Hello, and thanks for joining us for Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar. City of Santa Monica, California, population about 90,000. How can a city with just 90,000 residents be affecting so much change where sustainability is concerned and be recognized as one of the greenest cities in our nation? Well, this mighty metropolis of environmentalists, green businesses, and conscientious citizens has been a model of environmental stewardship for decades. And this begins with a Santa Monica nonprofit known as Sustainable Works. Santa Monica College is considered one of the greenest colleges in the nation. For the past 25 years, there has been an environmental center on campus, now part of the innovative Sustainable Works program. This was unheard of a quarter century ago for a two-year college to help lead the way as a good sustainability citizen. Today, SMC's renowned Center for Environmental and Urban Studies is the perfect backdrop for one of the greenest cities in the nation. The approach of the Environmental Center is to educate thousands of students about sustainability. The center, also dubbed the House on Pearl Street, is part of the Sunset Park Santa Monica neighborhood, just a few minutes from the ocean and the Santa Monica Pier. About 10 years ago, the center morphed into what environmentalists say is the most eco-friendly house on the block, kind of like a living lab where everything is sustainable, resilient, and zero emission. At closer inspection, this average-looking house, which could be located on any block of Main Street, USA, is a microcosm of green building. In this case, simple amenities to help save the environment and help save money. There are things like skylights and solar tubes, which illuminate the house during the day so no lights have to be used for much of the year, and a solar array on the roof to help with this energy-saving process. The utility bills are almost non-existent. There's a solar water heater which heats the water without taxing the energy grid and also doubles as an HVAC. That's because the excess heat from the water tank is sort of siphoned off to heat the building during the winter. The landscape is all native plants, so the garden uses about 90% less water than a typical lawn, and there's a 50% reduction in maintenance costs. And this is a zero-waste office, so the cost of any waste disposal is drastically reduced as well.
And if we continue to teach people how to do the job that has always been done the way it's always been done, things are not going to change.
Ferris Kawar is the Santa Monica College Sustainability Manager. He helps lead the Center for Environmental and Urban Studies at SMC. Ferris has dedicated his career to helping guide the younger generation on how to be both environmentally and economically sustainable.
We need to show these students that there is a better, healthier, more efficient way of doing things so that they really understand the full impact of the industries that they're interested in working in, so that they can go into those jobs and know that there's a better way of doing things. You can be more energy efficient, you can use less toxic inputs, you can use fewer resources, and they can change the industries from the inside. And really, we're going to fail if we don't make sure that the students who pass through here really understand the impacts they're going to have in their future careers.
Ferris explains the Environmental Center is ground zero for SMC's Sustainable Works workshop. This is an extra credit curriculum that hundreds of Santa Monica College students participate in every year. Some of the students who opt to take the workshop are self-proclaimed environmentalists, simply learning what else they can do to save the environment. However, most of the students have no environmental background whatsoever and admittedly know nothing about sustainability. These are the students the workshop is really hoping to influence, so these young people can eventually be sustainability change agents. The extra credit workshops begin with teaching these students about environmental problems and challenges, and then finding solutions. The program also teaches Going Green, with the goal of guiding students to the best career paths involving companies and industries that are putting in the effort to be good stewards of a sustainable society. The students learn about things like water efficiency, energy conservation, waste management, toxic chemical alternatives, transportation options, or simply how to be a conscious consumer. And don't expect a syllabus or a professor lecturing around here. The workshop is all about students teaching students. This is a peer-to-peer program. Basically, students who graduate from the program return the following school year to lead the workshops for the new batch of students.
Companies are looking for young, energetic people who understand sustainability to bring them out of the darkness and into the light, and really just help the company to see through a different prism. And what I tell students is, if they get out into the working world and the industry that they're working in is not ready for change, and they've got an entrepreneurial spirit and they've got a great idea, go ahead and leapfrog over the dinosaurs who refuse to change, because now is the time. You can develop an app, you can, actually get into the industries relatively quickly and cheaply today, and disrupt these ancient, business models that refuse to change. For too long, industries have had the opportunity to externalize the costs of doing business, the costs of pollution, really. Polluting air, soil, water really comes at a little to no cost to the companies, but society bears the cost of those damages. So we really need to teach the students that that you need to internalize these costs, so that we can actually have something, we can price our products and services properly, so that when you have an eco-friendly alternative, you're actually weighing apples to apples instead of, talking about false equivalents.
Ferris believes that sustainability programs here at Santa Monica College could be a prototype throughout the U.S., as environmentalists, politicians, community and civic leaders, and the general public try and find ways to fend off the depletion of our natural resources.
This model, what we're doing here on our campus, can be replicated across the nation. I think that the building itself should be, all building codes in the U.S. could benefit from adopting some of the things that we've done in here. It's very simple, very inexpensive. We'll save lots of people money in the long run. But what we're doing for the students is even more important. Making sure that throughout the curriculum on this campus, we are teaching students how to be responsible citizens, how to be responsible business people, so that we are accounting for, all the potential damage our products and services create.
Joining me now to discuss more about Sustainable Works and the collaboration with the City of Santa Monica and the rest of LA County is Gina Garcia. Gina is the co-executive director of Sustainable Works. She leads the community programs there and helps coordinate throughout LA County to keep SoCal green. Thank you so much for being here, Gina.
Thanks for having me, David.
Why is Santa Monica such a green city? Why is it taking the lead throughout the United States?
Well, when they say whenever you want to do something, you have to have a plan, and that's exactly what the city did. Way back in 1994, before many cities were doing anything, the city of Santa Monica came up with the Sustainable City Plan, and it adopted it. And it had 8 areas of impact that they wanted to cover, like resource conservation, transportation. So they actually had a plan to move forward and create a sustainable city. And that's kind of where Sustainable Works came out of. We were part of that plan.
How are your programs impacting the community of Santa Monica, the surrounding neighborhoods, and affecting change?
Well, it's remarkable. We are doing it in three different areas. We affect students, we affect the community, we affect businesses. Just recently at one of our events, a woman came up to me. She said, "I have to let you know, every time my husband and I come to one of your events, our lives get a little bit better." So I think we affect change. We have a great impact because we don't just leave people on their own. We really, people always talking about adopt sustainable behaviors, change your behavior, but how do you do that on your own? And that's what it's about. It's about helping people, meeting them where they're at and helping them to take the steps. And that's what we do with businesses, reducing their energy and their water, with community members changing their habits, with students who don't even know anything about sustainability, learning and getting involved.
And if you live here in Southern California, in the LA area, Gina, most folks know that Santa Monica is a fairly liberal city. Is it because it is a liberal, left-leaning city that it is able to be so environmentally friendly, or do conservative cities also have ways to be environmentally friendly? Say, for example, more conservative cities in Orange County, as an example.
Well, I'm going to turn around. I don't want to connect politics and environment. It's not right or left. It's about helping all of us. And I think the reason Santa Monica is so successful is because of this sustainable city plan, because that's what the city's goal is. The city does everything they can with policies and events and everything to make the city more sustainable, and they include the community in it. So I think it's more about that than about whether you're left or right. Because if you ask people, do you think that we should have a healthy and safe planet, whether you're Republican or Democrat, people say yes. It's just finding the methods and the tools and the commitment actually to do that. And that's what the city does really well.
Yet with that said, and I accept your answer, but then how do you talk to some of your conservative colleagues who aren't as environmentally friendly as you and say, hey, let's just all speak the same language here?
Well, you come at a point of not what are you not doing and why are you wrong and why are your opinions wrong, but what needs to happen and looking at goals of where do we envision? And when you actually sit down and talk with people about what they want, we all kind of want the same thing. We want clean air and clean water. So if you talk about that, also bring in health impacts, especially like with COVID, when people realize it's going to affect their health in a negative way, they're more likely to be on board. So talk about how it affects them personally, where you want to go, and then really encourage the small steps they've taken, as opposed to saying, well, you didn't do this, you're not doing that. Here are some things you can do, and then really encourage to meet people where they're at so that they can take the steps to move forward.
Going forward, what are the challenges to be such an environmentally friendly city?
Well, funding is a huge one for what, with all cities are struggling. So some of the city's goals have been reduced, and hopefully that won't last too much longer. So funding is one of the biggest issues, and, expanding and going outside of, like you said, we're a more liberal city. We're kind of close, expanding out and sharing our message with other communities and other cities. Because, when the city came up with their sustainable city plan, we became a nonprofit, Sustainable Works, as part of that plan, with the goal that we would be doing this for other cities outside of Santa Monica. And that hasn't really happened as much as the vision when it was created.
And I know you don't want to talk politics. It just seems that environmentalism and sustainability, there is that political element to it. I mean, you have half the country that somewhat doesn't believe in the climate science. You have the other half that is saying it's an existential threat, right? Climate change, global warming, et cetera. How do you bridge that divide then? Because there must be some sort of centrist position where we all can simply say, hey, we're all in this together, me, we, let's try to find a solution.
Right. Well, it's actually less than half think that it's, are not on board. And it's hard. It's hard to, I think what you have to do is create relationships with people first before you start hitting them with environmental issues. You have to create relationships first so that they know that you understand where they're coming from. And just reaching out to, we're always trying to preach to the choir. And that's one great thing about one of the programs we have, is that we bring people in who have no idea about sustainability. And so it's to start to stop preaching to the choir and finding those opportunities, we do film screenings, entertaining opportunities where you can bring people in that aren't like-minded and have a conversation with them and put those first little hints into their brain to help them adopt some of these ideas.
Gina, early on in closing, Sustainable Works was really a prototype locally for Southern California, the LA area, Santa Monica. Could what you're doing at Sustainable Works with your programs, I guess, say, be a prototype for the rest of the nation? Could you work with other cities and maybe even teach them what you're doing to achieve all this success to be so eco-friendly?
Yeah, well, we are working on that. We actually did expand some of our programs into Culver City. And we do get like universities from around the country email us and say they've seen our program and they want to do it. So it is a goal, and it is something that's doable. But again, I think cities have to be on board and help fund the programs, because that's where, most of the funding comes from. But, having an organization that's helping a city to implement the plans and the goals they have and communicating with the community members and the businesses to get them involved is beneficial for cities. And I think the more cities see this as a benefit, the more they're likely to adopt it, and to have other organizations, maybe not even Sustainable Works, help them because it's really about helping cities and communities reach their goals. So I don't see why other cities and communities around the country wouldn't want that. Gina
Garcia of Sustainable Works, a great organization. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for the interview.
Thank you so much, David, for having me.
And now from the west side of Los Angeles to the west side of Kansas City. In Kansas City's historic West Side neighborhood, gentrification, well, it's a very contested word. A tug of war among the old and the new. Kansas City is an example of what is happening all throughout the U.S. today. Residents who've lived in their homes for decades versus real estate developers or city officials over the best way to evolve older iconic neighborhoods for a sustainable future. PBS station KCPT in Kansas City has our story.
What's vital to the future of Kansas City is that first, we have more Kansas Cityans. That would be good, right? Because you need population to fill these stores and ride the streetcar. But you also need to say, and how do we have it be a place that people of all walks of life want to live? That's, I think, what the key question is. A booming city doesn't always lift all boats. And what we need to make sure is that we do have a rising tide that does so. I'm concerned that we don't right now. To an extent, we have to get out of our own world and challenge ourselves in a fundamentally different way.
Gentrification, is it happening? Could it happen? Is it bad? It's a funny word. If you imagine that word meaning an existing neighborhood that has a certain physical, financial level under which it operates, and then the neighborhood has a major influx of new people that have a higher, maybe physical descriptive standard of what the neighborhood should look like and have more powerful financial means, and then they use a combination of those to sort of change the character of the neighborhood. If that's what you mean by gentrification, yeah, that's happening in my community.
The West Side is one of the, I think, most vibrant and unique neighborhoods in Kansas City, and it is complex and it is changing, and absolutely we are seeing gentrification on the West Side.
With the segregation and the isolation and the redlining and the urban renewal and no investment, and now you're coming to them saying we're going to gentrify you and you expect them to be happy about it? No, they're not going to be happy about that. And I wouldn't blame them one bit if I smacked you right between the eyes.
Back then, the West Side was a poor area that had housing, affordable housing. And so those individuals that decided to call the West Side their home created a community.
If there's one neighborhood where there's going to be a fight, a confrontation, or a negotiation about what happens there, it's going to be that neighborhood.
And then the big thing that I want you to take away from tonight is that this is the start of a conversation, because I want to make sure that we have the opportunity as a neighborhood for everybody who wants to have a seat at the table to have a seat at the table, and make sure that we're all working together for the West Side to be exactly the neighborhood that we want it to be.
Not all gentrification is bad, maybe for you, but what about the community that's already there? How are you engaging with this community?
The West Side neighborhood, I think everybody will agree, has experienced a lot of gentrification pressure over the past decade, and it's been good to some people and not good for a lot of people.
I say from the West Side, I've grown up in what I call brutally inclusive community politics. I mean, like brutal, man. Get ready.
We want to make our own decisions. That should have been brought to the neighborhood, and you didn't.
You have a lot of people in our neighborhood who are very passionate about our neighborhood. They don't call us the Wild Wild West for nothing.
We kind of feel like we're experiencing mass differences.
We have a history of trying to keep our community an ethnic community. Not once in your proposal have you said anything about maintaining an ethnic character in this community.
One of the hardest issues is making sure that you celebrate and protect your existing neighborhoods while not turning a back on progress.
The biggest community meetings are always about new developers.
You know, what we see at times with some developers is like, well, you know, the city says I can do this, so this is what I'm gonna do. And then the residents have to go and remind the city, well, wait a minute, you made amendments to this plan and you're not upholding it. And so then we get into this fight, and sometimes you come out of it where there is a compromise that benefits everyone, and those are the Via the Soul projects. And then there's other times when you get projects like, gee whiz, I mean, how did this happen?
Gentrification and its threats actually really do fundamentally affect, I think, the social fabric of a community. And if we want to keep a community that's interesting and dynamic and that supports public transit and supports all of the infrastructure investment we've made in Kansas City, then we need to keep our mind on that. Particularly when we're talking about urban redevelopment, urban infill. So much of our policy answer is to say, let's make it like the suburbs, right? We can bring people back from something.
I mean, you're basically trading people for one, because all of a sudden that area is attractive, that area is marketable, and disregard the people living there. That's not the right way to rebuild urban cities.
When it comes to affordable housing, quite frankly, when you get to looking around and you get to looking at the numbers, you're going to find that on the west side, we're pretty lucky. There are 2 HUD complexes in our neighborhood, West Bluff and Villa del Sol is there. Villa del Sol is a unique, wonderful complex.
One of the first projects in the country, it took new legislation working with HUD where they removed the projects, built a new project, and it made it a combination of LIHTC, low-income housing tax credit, some Section 8, voucher housing, and market rate.
The benefits are that as gentrification occurs in the neighborhood, there is affordable housing there that is there in perpetuity. So those income ranges will not change as long as that development is there. And it was very important to the community.
Now that project is about, 17, 18 years old. It still looks new, and it lives and is integrated in our community.
People always assume that people of different races won't live together. And that assumption carries into income. People assume people of different incomes won't live together. And this development proves all that wrong. So that communities can develop and can grow and thrive when there are people of different age groups, incomes, and races all working together because they believe in the same community values.
The one thing that I know about the West Side is the men and women who have lived there for generations want to work hard to kind of save their community, and so it's a difficult task, but it's one that I think is worth fighting for.
The West Side is booming. It's a lot better than it used to be, I'll tell you. A lot better. And I've been here 57 years.
When I came to the West Side, my intention wasn't to be a gentrifier, and it wasn't to run anybody off. Sometimes, unfortunately, it's really tricky. I wake up with a stomachache sometime and think, did I create the force for displacement by taking the things that were vacant? And it's like, okay, if I say, yeah, I did that, and so now, really, Jones, you didn't do what you wanted to do, man. When people start sending you letters asking you, I want to buy your house, I don't want all my old neighbors getting a letter like that.
They leave notes, send me notes here all the time. They want to buy the place. I'm not going to call no names, but it's quite a few around here want it very bad. But I'm going to let my son take it over.
I don't have a problem bringing new people in here. I think that's good, but not at the expense of the ones that have been here before. And so that's the struggle that we face now. I'm worried, as with all this new influx of people, that the next representative for this neighborhood might not be as supportive and would have a completely different mindset. would be more in line with the downtown developers. And if that happens, the gentrification of this community is just going to be exacerbated.
Tell you what, the worst way to gentrify, in my opinion, is when you get the government to do it with you. And it happens all the time. Right? They say, hey, we need to build population downtown. How can we do it? Hey, let's bring in a lot of low-income housing tax credits and all of that. Then we can get people in the city market and downtown. How cool is that? So that only a generation later, you have this situation where, hey, let's incentivize a bunch of luxury housing and other sorts of things that these people could absolutely never afford. And what's more, the low-income housing tax credits will roll off, so therefore we actually can't keep those people there. And these are people that often aren't working. These are people that are engaged and active in our economy. So these poor people who pay taxes too, right, are helping finance their own removal. It's kind of on us. It's on the people watching. It's on the people that participate to say, wait, before you tell me about the next big thing, how are we going to actually make life better for people who live here?
Thank you, KCPT in Kansas City, for that report. Now back to Los Angeles and the potential return of smog due to the potential fallout from deregulation of car emission standards. This next story is brought to you through a special collaboration with KLCS PBS and Arizona State University's Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications as we partner with and mentor students seeking to explore the environment through their reporting. Here is Kyla Wilcher with Cronkite News.
LA is notorious for smoke and fog, or smog, because it's the first city to address the issue of smog in the skies. LA officials created the nation's first air quality regulator back in 1947, but it wasn't until 1984 that the state started mandating smog checks for all cars. Now California could be facing cutbacks to their smog standards. Air pollution, especially from cars and fossil fuels, is not just an LA problem. According to 2019 rankings from the American College of Sports Medicine, Long Beach, California ranked worst in air quality, but 6 cities in the valley round out the top 10. Suzanne Paulson is a professor of atmospheric chemistry at UCLA. She says the LA area's geography traps smog as it forms.
We have a very clean city as cities go, with some sort of conditions that are specific to local, our location.
Paulson has spent the last 30 years in Southern California and says she's noticed dramatic improvements in the air quality since she moved to LA decades ago.
Most fall afternoons, a wall of smog would roll in.
Chris Chavez works for the Coalition for Clean Air. He grew up in Long Beach, and as a child who had asthma, he understands the impacts of air pollution firsthand.
You know, pollution definitely impacts the people that live there, and certainly is a major concern of residents in that region.
While California has made large strides in air quality, Chavez and Paulson say the state has a long way to go.
At the end of the day, if California's going to have the tools to protect its citizens and combat climate change, rolling back these standards and freezing or revoking California's waiver is certainly going to stand in the way of that.
On Tuesday, Trump administration officials told California to abide by their standards or risk losing funding for highways. In Santa Monica, Kyla Wilcher, Cronkite News.
Thanks, Kyla Wilcher and the Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications for that report. For more information about our program, just click on klcs.org and then click Contact Us to send us your questions and comments or story ideas so we can hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Sustaining Us here on KLCS PBS. I'm David Nazar.